I'm really impressed with what Google has been able to do with the Pixel 4a. I'm not going to review it yet, but overall impressions and everything with it has been great. It's been wonderful. So of course, the big question we all have on our minds ever since day one with this thing is, how is Google gonna screw this up? Today we're talking about the Pixel 4a 5G and the Pixel 5. This is not going to be confusing at all. Let's begin. Okay, so these things are 100% real. Google has confirmed they exist and that they're coming out later, likely launching near the end of September, so we've got a little bit longer before they really come out, but it is kind of weird. I had to double check this report several times to make sure I got it right, but essentially, Google has 2 more phones they're planning on launching in the rest of 2020, if you didn't think this year could get any worse, and one of them has this kind of speckled look to it, which kind of gives the illusion of metal, but apparently the people that have access to these phones already, because of course it's Google, it's always like, well, the phone is launching in 6 months, better send it out to a bunch of random people on Reddit, and people on Reddit seem to be claiming that this is still going to be a plastic phone, so both devices are going to be rocking kind of the same plasticky material of the Pixel 4a, which by all means isn't really bad, but it definitely showcases that Google is moving away from the flagship department. If you were hoping for a decent successor to the Pixel 4 that was going to enhance the Pixel 4 in a lot of ways and make it better and outperform, that sounds like it's not really going to be the case. This is kind of a new direction for Google, which makes me wonder if they should really even call it the Pixel 5 at all, or maybe they should consider rebranding here. But so the somewhat confusing part is this leaked photo, which originally I thought the smaller phone was going to be the 4a 5G, which is basically just a bigger version of this phone that also has 5G modems and also, of course, the extra camera. And then the bigger phone would be the Pixel 5, right? That kind of made sense in my head of like, okay, the flagship phone, the more expensive phone with the better features, that would be the big one, and then the cheaper phone that's not as fancy, that can be the small one. Well, in this case, it kind of resembles the 2017 iPhone lineup a little bit, when we had the smaller iPhone 8, the bigger iPhone 8 Plus, and in the middle we had the iPhone 10 that was way better and cooler in a lot of ways, but more expensive. This is like that, except if every phone looked like the iPhone 10. What? Oh god, it's already confusing me. But actually, the smaller phone in this picture is the Pixel 5. So the higher priced Pixel that they're releasing is going to be rocking a 6-inch display, which is honestly not much bigger than this with a 5.8-inch display, so just a little bit bigger. It's got a dual camera on the back, and the interesting thing about this camera is that apparently it's going to be an ultra-wide lens this year, not a telephoto. So who else remembers that moment in Pixel 4's event last year when they were like, while ultra-wides are fun, we believe telephoto is more important. Yeah, that guy's gone, so he's not at the company anymore, and now they're like, okay, so while telephoto is more important, ultra-wides are more fun. So that's our angle this year. So just keep it all going with the tradition of Google saying one thing one year and then changing their mind the next year. It's kind of hilarious how consistently they go back on themselves. Literally every single year, they change their mind on something and go back on it, and it doesn't get old how much Google looks like a clown every time they change their mind on something. But yeah, remember the face unlock features the Pixel 4 had, and solely in air gestures and that kind of thing? So your boy called it, saying that this would be gimmicky and no one would want it, and that Samsung tried it and it didn't work, so I don't know why Google was trying it again. But yeah, they're ditching that, so the front of these phones should look pretty much near identical to the front of the Pixel 4a, which again, not bad. I don't think this is the worst year for the Pixel lineup. It's just a little bit confusing, but luckily the Pixel 5 will still be rocking a 90 hertz display, so no, they're not pushing it to 120 this year. But still, given the fact that it's likely going to be a much more affordable phone than most of the $1,000 flagships out there that have 120 hertz, 90 hertz is good, but of course the main concern is battery life, because the Pixel 4 had a tremendously bad battery last year. It was a very big topic when it came to why did Google increase the refresh rate and then shrink the size of the battery. No one knows. It makes no sense, but the people with access to these phones early are saying that the Pixel 5 should have around a 4,000 milliamp hour battery, which is considerably bigger. It should get you through the day a lot better than the Pixel 4 did, so it is improvement in that way. But the confusing part of this report is that apparently that bigger phone with a 6.2-inch display, the Pixel 4a 5G, this one just with standard 60 hertz, so it's not 90, and again with the plastic back, it's basically just this phone but bigger and with 5G modems in it. That one is actually going to have a 3,800 milliamp hour battery. So help me understand here. Maybe the leaks are wrong. That's happened before. That's happened a lot this year actually, but the bigger phone has the smaller battery pack compared to the smaller Pixel 5. So yeah, I don't get it either. Doesn't really make much sense to me, but sounds like that 4A 5G is going to come in multiple colors. And both of these phones are also going to be rocking the Snapdragon 765G, which this is the type of Snapdragon chip you see in average mid-range smartphones. In fact, the OnePlus Nord also rocks a 765G. However, that phone is not available in the US, whereas these Pixels most likely will. So it's kind of a different market here compared to outside the US, where OnePlus Nord is the thing, in which case probably the best deal you can get on phones. I get that, it's just not here. The 765G is actually performance-wise a little bit worse than the Pixel 4, so it's actually a downgrade when it comes to CPU and GPU performance, but it does again allow you to have 5G, which is I guess what anyone cares about these days. And of course, as you may have noticed, the fingerprint readers are on the back of these phones, so no, they're not even doing under the display fingerprint readers, which should help with cost and bringing down the overall price. But Google themselves has brought up that these next generation phones are going to start at $500. Obviously, it makes sense to assume that the 4A 5G, just the bigger version of this phone with 5G, that's going to likely start at $500, which is honestly kind of a big jump up if you consider. I think this phone is priced really fairly at $350. It's got one camera, obviously, and it doesn't have the 5G modems, but it's really comfortable. It's a decent size, and display-wise, it's going to be pretty near identical to this $500 4A 5G with a bigger screen, two cameras on the back. That's pretty much all it has going for it. For an extra $150, I don't know. Would you guys do it? I don't know. It seems like a big jump for me. And then, of course, the big mystery is how much the smaller Pixel 5 is going to cost. The one with the 90 hertz display. And honestly, looking back at it, it sounds like that might be the only thing it has going for it. So Google, you want to have two phones in the 4A department because these phones are cheaper and don't have as much flagship features. So they're between $350 and $500. Okay, kind of a weird jump, but that's your 4A lineup. And then over here you have the Pixel 5, which has the same dual camera as the 4A, and the only upgrade it has is the 90 hertz display. Okay, I mean, if Google's willing to charge an extra $150 for a larger screen and a dual camera on the back and 5G modems, then what is the Pixel 5 going to end up costing? My hope would be around $550. I would say even $600 is kind of pushing it for these specs. In case you weren't sure what the rest of the phone would have, it's basically 128 gigs of storage, 8 gigs of RAM. So, you know, kind of covering the basics in the Android department, nothing too amazing. But I don't know if people would be willing to spend an extra $100 just to have a 90 hertz display. I mean, I would, but I'm weird and I wouldn't buy a Pixel in the first place, so it's gonna be kind of a weird lineup. In my opinion, it's just kind of the way they're branding it that's a little bit bizarre. If I were in charge, I would have called this phone the Pixel 5 and just said this is the new normal, and then you can have Pixel 5 Plus or Max or Ultra, I don't care what you call it, and then, you know, Pixel 5 Pro or whatever, because it has a higher refresh rate display. I don't know, this phone just sounds weird overall. I don't think Google needed to make 3 phones this year. Is it just me, or does this lineup feel a little bit too complicated and a little bit too, not one phone has that many great features over the other phone? All of them seem pretty close together in terms of design and features, that the pricing of them is going to make or break them, and knowing that they want to do a $150 price jump just for the 4A 5G seems like an overstep. It's kind of reaching, and it also says a lot about how expensive 5G modems are. So in my opinion, after hearing about these leaks, don't wait for the Pixel 5 or the 4A 5G. They're probably not worth your time. If you're willing to spend $500 or more on a phone, there's probably going to be a much better Samsung or OnePlus available. Whereas the Pixel 4A, I think, is very reasonably priced for what it offers. If you like the Pixel hardware, this is probably the best way to go. And the real question is, will the headphone jack make it over to these phones? Or is that going to be considered a budget feature that just everyday flagships can't get? What do you guys think? Hopefully I'm wrong on some of them, because the way they currently stand, it's too weird. I don't get it. Google, what is there thought in this at all, or are we just shooting blanks in the dark? This is your Alp Sheep here. I'll see you in the next one.